I'm Brad Wolf, and welcome to DireDen. This is the Mastering the Game series where I have interviewed 8 different YouTube dungeon masters on all the different aspects of being a game master. And this video is part 3 of my interview with Riker from Cleric's Corner, where we talk about the game master as the director. Getting more dialed into the session itself, like the idea of being a director and you're in the game session. Like, how do you know if a scene is going on too long? How do you know if you need to move away from a scene?
Yeah, great question. The answer is when I'm bored. When you as a DM is watching this and you're like, okay, we need to get something else. That's a pretty telltale sign that you probably should move to something else, right? I feel like as a DM especially, you'll develop this sixth sense innately. But if players are having a conversation and like you zone out and you're somewhere else and you come back in and you're like, oh, they're still talking. Okay, like let's move it along. Let's give somebody else the spotlight, right? Or and that could look like just what are you doing, over here? What is this player doing? Or you look at your notes and like, oh shoot, I'm supposed to have an owlbear come into at this moment, and then you have an owlbear kind of crash through the trees and interrupt them, right? So there's a lot at your disposal, but I think at ground level, if you're feeling emotions, then your players are usually feeling those too, right?
That's a good point. So if I was to take that advice and kind of imagine myself at the table, I will find myself, getting bored with we've got 2 characters who are really interacting and they're really going at it, right? They're having a good time. And then I'll turn to, a third player and say, so you hear them saying all of this stuff. How are you feeling, or what are you thinking about this drama, right? So now I'm pulling in another player into the scene, and if that doesn't like give us some juice, then it's time for the owlbear attack, right?
Yes. I think it's important to say, like, you're not taking away the fun from those 2 characters who are talking, right? But you're spreading the fun back around to other players at the table. They're gonna have fun no matter what. It's just spreading it around. So, like, for example, I had a session where one player kind of went off into a library to the side while the other players went into another room and started fighting some constructs, right? This other player can't be a part of the fight. So it's really hard to be like, okay, well, what are you doing? And then going back to the fight. Okay, then what are you doing? And then going back to the fight. 'Cause it's just reading books, right? So that's an example of where it's something hard, but you still can do that. You can see, like, what are you studying? These are the things you're figuring out. But what I did was she had also lost her memory. There's a lot of memory loss in this campaign. She was losing her memory, but she came across a photo of basically an evil king. We'll call it an evil king, and she immediately got memory of this thing where she was trying to assassinate this king in this memory of hers, and so she got to replay that fight while the other people were doing their fight. So we had the mano a mano on their turn, on her turn, and then a regular fight with the constructs on the other side. And we went back and forth that way, and that was great. That was probably one of my favorite fights to DM, just because everyone was everyone was kind of worried about each other, but they couldn't do anything about it.
That's great. That's a great way to do it, because that's also like one of the things I recommend because everybody says never split the party, never split the party.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people do the opposite of what you just did, and you just leave 1 or 2 players sitting there doing nothing while you do this role play or do this fight, right?
Yes.
But the best way to handle that, especially if one half of the party is in a combat, is to find a way to get the other half of the party into combat. Because once you're in initiative, everybody's still taking a turn. They're just half of them are taking a turn over there, and half of them are taking a turn over here.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So that's a great way to cut from one scene to another, is just have them both be in combat, and then the initiative order does it for you, right?
Yeah.
That brings me to the other question of, like, because you kind of hinted at this, right, with the 2 players who are really having a good time role playing out a scene, and everybody else is starting to get bored. And you said it's okay to cut away from that because they were having fun and they're not really going to stop having fun. And one of the tips like you talk about in in movie making is you want to leave the audience wanting more, right?
Yeah, it's a great point.
And so I think what you just said there is a great example of that. So they were having fun in this, focusing on whatever the topic of conversation was, whatever plan they were hatching or whatever they were, coming up with. And by cutting away, you leave them wanting more. So you always know now that's something I can cut back to in a later session when there's, when I get stalled on something else.
Absolutely. You can use that as momentum in the future. One thing that I thought about while you were talking too is just another element that directors use a lot, less in movies, but more in plays, is an intermission. And I think that intermissions are so important, not to change the subject, but intermissions are so important because it allows the players to take a break as well as the director to kind of take stock of everything. Now, I don't usually take breaks in the middle of my sessions. Usually my sessions are like 2.5 hours. Used to be 4, cut that down. But there was one time where my players were fighting, a BBEG, and the BBEG teleported away. Right. So they're gone. They're on this planet because there's a Spelljammer game. They're on this desert planet, and like they teleported somewhere on this planet. There's no way that they can figure out where they are. However, the players are like, we really want to find this guy. Like, we want to use everything in our power to figure out how we can find this guy and finish him off. So I'm like, okay, this isn't what I planned for. So let's take an intermission. Let's take 5 minutes. I can go back to the script, rewrite it, right? And then come back to play out the rest of the play or play out the rest of the session. And that's exactly what we did. It's like I pulled up a map to where he was. I figured out a way that they could figure out where he was. And then once we got back in, that's exactly what they did. And it was one of their favorite sessions ever, right? So it demanded a little bit more work on my part in the middle, but I was open to doing that and using intermission. I think that's just another tool that DMs can use.
In some ways, that can also build suspense because I wonder your players like,
yeah,
what's he doing over there? What's he figuring out? How's he gonna? Because that's what
True.
I would be doing. Like, some people might be taking that 5-minute break to like get a snack and relax. I'd be like, what's he doing? What's he up to?
Yeah, trying to peek over the DM screen, like, oh, does it get hits? I mean, hey, Matthew Mercer does it all the time, right? It's the ad break, but he always tries to end it like on a wait, no, like what's gonna happen kind of moment, and you can absolutely do that to build suspension.
Well, and that sets up one of the questions that I have on the list here is cliffhangers, right? How do you insert a cliffhanger to whether it's like at that break in the middle of the game or at the end of the game to set up for next session?
Yeah, I use a special little thing that some people might know from Sly Flourish, is the 8 steps of game prep, where you review the characters, create a strong start, outline potential scenes, define sequences and clues, develop fantastic locations, outline important NPCs, choose relevant monsters, and then select magic item lures and clues for rewards. And then I've added a couple more to my own, but I think that when it comes to the strong start, I plan for that. And when it comes to the cliffhanger at the end, I plan for that. But that doesn't mean that those things will happen, right? The strong start probably will, but the cliffhanger at the end probably won't. And it's just again, it's kind of like a muscle that you use, that you get used to, or that you strengthen over time, where it's like you see where the campaign is going, you're kind of writing the script on the side as it's happening, and you're like, okay, it's maybe in the middle of something right now, so I can't end it now, but in 20 minutes, I'll introduce this, and this is where we'll end, right? And it's almost planning for the cliffhanger at like as you're kind of going along.
Yeah, that's great. I love those 8 steps, and I use them as well because they're just so solid. I would add to that by saying that you can always end a session early.
Yeah.
That it's okay to end the session 10, 15 minutes early if it's the perfect place for a cliffhanger. Because the cliffhanger does so much. Like you were saying, it gives you that strong start for next session, but it also builds anticipation. So now the players are waiting a week to find out what happened when we went over that waterfall.
Yeah,
right?
I've stopped at 45 minutes
Oh
before we
wow.
were supposed to end because I think also like especially if you feel unprepared going into the next little bit as a DM, you're like, "Ooh, I've come this far. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do for the next part. I'm going to end it early so that I can give them the best experience when we eventually do." Right?
Right. No, I think that's a great point that you don't have to use your whole game session. That sometimes that leave them wanting more, not
Hmm.
just it applies not just to a scene, but it can apply to the whole session. So ending early is okay if you're setting yourself up for that strong start next time.
Yeah, and ending in the middle of a fight is okay. Like ending in the middle of a combat where like an extra like you're fighting all of these like little demon minions and then the devil himself walks in, or you're fighting these constructs and then the floor gives out beneath you and you just end right there, right? Or one of your players gets like thrown in a net and dragged away and you end it right there. So you create these elements even in the middle of the fight. It hasn't ended yet, and that's kind of how you even set up an easy, strong start in the middle of a fight. So, anyways, that's just another way to do it.
Yeah, those are three great examples. Those are all good. So great stuff. Well, so any final thoughts on this idea of being a director as a game master?
It's okay if you mess up, and it's okay to have bad sessions. There will be sessions that do not look great, and then you come away from totally bummed out about. I had this session just 2 weeks ago where I came back. I'm like, I didn't prepare for this. I didn't do great at kind of weaving those notes. There was no really content or context within it. And I came out of that. I'm like, I got to do better. And then the next one was phenomenal. One of my favorite sessions ever. But just being nice to yourself when it comes to being a director because you're playing with a lot of people and there's a lot of people involved, and I think a lot of this comes down to the improvisational, which there's another conversation, but it's weaving those story elements together in a way that's evocative and interesting. It's a hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes practice, right? You have to put some effort into it. And what I love about what you said there is like, don't be hard on yourself, right?
Hmm.
Give yourself the grace to kind of learn. I've been doing this for decades, but like you said, just a few weeks ago in one of my sessions, I I looked at the session afterwards and like, man, I missed a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Going back to the character who's becoming a mind flare, like he actually in the moment turned to the hive mind and reached out to the hive mind
Oh shoot, yeah.
and so we established some very important story elements, right?
Hmm.
But I was tired. I wasn't feeling great that night.
Yep.
And after the fact, I was like, we established the story elements that we needed to in that moment, but I totally missed the opportunity to role play the hive mind. Like
Yeah.
instead of just telling him, in that quick moment that you get this psychic communication, I just gave him the information, right?
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
missed the opportunity to role play a hive mind. I don't even know what that would have looked like, but had I been, feeling better and really on my game, I don't know what I would have come up with. But,
Hmm.
after the fact, I was like, man, I really missed that opportunity. But, like you said, you can't go back and change it.
Yeah.
But now you can kind of think ahead. So now I'm like, okay, what does it mean to role play the hive mind? Because I know he's
Hmm.
going to do it again, and I'm going to have that
Yeah.
opportunity to do it again, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it's that point where normally directors in the real world, like they write the script beforehand and then they play it out, they practice, right? If it's a play, there's rehearsals over and over again, getting it perfect. As a DM, you don't get that, and you're writing on the fly. You're writing as the play is happening, right? You're handing out the sheets of paper to your players as things are going on. So it is extremely difficult. Now, I will say again, and a very important part of being a director is getting that feedback from the players. And if it's not on like one-on-one, it's individually with your players. If it's something that your players don't communicate well to you, I've often used like forms like Google Forms, surveys where it's like, hey, what's your favorite NPC? What are you excited about your character? To explore. What's something that you enjoy most about what your character can do? And just line by line, just a bunch of things that like, what are you excited to explore? And then they can kind of fill that out, and then you have sheets that you can work with and look back to to reference these characters and to write out the story.
That's a great idea. Like, I've never thought of doing it like a survey format, so that so they can, all they have to do is just like check boxes. It's like multiple choice questions, right? Yeah,
easy. Yeah.
That makes it a lot easier for you to collect that data and for them to give you that feedback, right? That's a really, I'm stealing that idea. I'm gonna start doing
go for it. Please do.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on and talking about the role of the director as a game master. Really insightful stuff. Thanks for coming.
No kidding. Thanks for having me.
So, of course, the last question, as always, is what do you want to plug? What do you got going on? Like, what's something cool that you want to tell us about?
Oh man, there's always something cool in the realm of D&D. But obviously I'm always putting out new videos. I've recently been in talks with like Dungeon Coach and wanting me to do more DC 20 stuff, which is exciting. I think a lot of my audience want to see that, but also not letting the D&D 5e go, where we're going into a big revamp of that. And so I'm also excited about starting kind of a new series of like history versus D&D, which I started during Kraken Week, where it's like taking the actual monster that we have in D&D and how does that compare to the one of historical significance in the real world, and how is that different? And I just find that really interesting. So a lot of new videos that I'm kind of playing with, and obviously come to my channel to check them out. So
great stuff. Yeah, I loved your Kraken Week videos. One of my like favorites, like probably top 5.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
that means a lot.
stuff.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was you as well had phenomenal. I mean, it was so cool to see so many people that I hadn't previously really known as well, to be able to really experience their videos and be like, oh my gosh, like this is cool.
Yeah, Kraken Week was a great way to share ideas and learn. Like, there's so many creators I follow now that I didn't know existed before Kraken Week.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
Yeah.
so many people out there that are now following you and me now. That's great.
Yeah.
Happy to have you guys.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. All right. Well, again, thanks for coming on, sharing your wisdom with us. And go check out Cleric Corner if you haven't already.
And check out Dire Dan if you came here from my channel.
Thanks. And look forward to working with you again in the future. This has been great.
Okay. Thanks for having me. See ya.
All right. Thanks everybody for visiting the Dire Dan. I'll see you next time.